and I just was reading it, and it was just more alive. It was more, it almost like there was like a soundtrack to reading the Word of God that I don't think I'd heard before. Like things made more sense. I think my brain, when I tell you about my scans, I think my brain was actually processing the information, the scriptures, in a way different way than they ever had before because I was so distracted.
Hello, Bible lovers. Welcome to another episode of Unscrolled here at the Museum of the Bible, the podcast about around everything concerning the Bible. Today, we're joined by author, podcaster, speaker, digital detoxer, and we'll find out what exactly else he is, Carlos Whittaker. Hey, Carlos.
How's it going? Thanks
good.
for having me.
Well, quick intro from my side. I'm going to ask you who you are, but Carlos, for those of you who don't know him, hosts his own podcast called the Carlos Whittaker Podcast. He has written 6 books on topics around faith and caring for others. His most recent book, which we're going to talk about quite a bit today, is called Reconnect. It's about an experience living 7 weeks without any screens. Imagine that, or pretty much all modern technology. Something I think a lot of people in the Bible experienced because phones or screens are relatively new. So, Carlos, what would you tell people that they need to know about you outside of what I just mentioned? Who are you?
Who am I? Who is Carlos? As we were talking before, I am the son of 2 immigrants to America who came. My father came from Colón, Panama, when he was 18 years old with $20 cash in a shoe shine kit. And shined shoes at LAX for 2 years, made enough money for 1 semester at LA Community College, and the rest is history. And then my mother is from Monterrey, Mexico. And they raised me in East LA. I was born in East LA and then kind of raised in Atlanta. But probably the most important things about me is I am the husband of Heather Whittaker. We've been married 25 years. In a month, it's going to be 25 years.
Wow.
We've got 3 beautiful children who aren't necessarily children anymore, but 23-year-old Sohaila, who just got married last summer, 21-year-old Sayana, who's getting married pretty soon, and then my 19-year-old son, Losiah. We live in Nashville, Tennessee, and the thing I love most about my life right now literally is my family. Like and I think it's because they're all leaving, so I can't get enough of them. It's a sweet, sweet season.
And I think it's a season of change, right? And a season of self-reflection. I am not as far yet, but close my the first 2 are out of the house, and you kind of wonder, what I do. I wouldn't call it a midlife crisis, but you just kind of figure out, you have to reinvent yourself, right? Everything circled around kids before. Right. Was that kind of a trigger for your latest project?
I think maybe not in that way, but for sure, I realized, because what happened is I got a screen time notification that we get on Sundays if your phone does this, and it tells you how many hours a day you've been averaging. So Sundays, you normally says, you have averaged 5 hours and 23 minutes a day on your phone. Well, mine said 7 hours and 23 minutes a day on my phone. But immediately I go, well, but this is what I do for a living. Like I talk to my phone, I make TikToks, I make YouTube videos. So I made an excuse. But then I did the math. And this is what has to do with your question. The math told me that 7 hours and 23 minutes a day looking at my iPhone is actually 49 hours a week. So that's 2 entire cycles of the sun I'm staring at my phone. The math that kept going was that's over 100 days a year. So out of 365 days, 100 days of those, I'm looking at my phone.
Wow.
Then, this is to answer your question. If I live to be 85, the math told me if I continue at this pace, I will miss over 12 years of life in front of me.
Goodness.
So I literally will miss that much life. So when my kids were about to graduate from high school, when Sohaila was is when this math happened, and it shook me. And I thought, I can't miss. I would miss. That would literally be like, Sohaila was 20 at the time. That would be like me missing only knowing her for 8 years of her 20 years. And I said, this is ridiculous. So that led to the experiment that you're talking about.
There's obviously characters in the Bible who kind of they didn't take their phones away,
Sure.
but they spent time in the desert or away
Yes.
from
Oh,
everything
yeah.
to shut off. Elijah, David, Jesus spent
Yes.
40 days before his ministry. Is that something that kind of played a role or inspired you?
Yeah, well, definitely, because what I did, I took, so everyone knows, as we're teasing, I took 7.5 weeks. Okay, so basically 2 months, and I didn't look at a single screen. So I didn't look at an iPhone, an Apple Watch, a laptop, a TV, nothing. And I lived in the middle with a Amish family in Amish Town, Ohio, and it's called Mount Hope, Ohio, for 2 weeks. They're a sheep farming family, so obviously their technology uses are a lot less than mine. And then the other 2 weeks, I lived with 20 Benedictine monks in the high desert of Southern California. At an abbey, and then for 3 weeks I lived with my family at home in Nashville, where I didn't look at a screen. But the whole desert, and why Jesus went to the desert, and I'm no theologian. You probably, if you search the history of the Museum of the Bible podcast, you will find some incredible theologians, I'm sure. But you don't have to be a theologian to hang out in the desert for 14 days with 20 Benedictine monks and realize this is why the desert is spoken about so much in Scripture. I honestly became a different human being when I was there. And so, yeah, I think there was a little bit of that. There was a little bit of journey. And it definitely, those 7.5 weeks there were some really big wilderness moments for me, while I was completely disconnected. The book is called Reconnected because everyone was like, how was it when you disconnected for 7 weeks? And I was like, actually, I feel like I only disconnected for 3 days. And then for the rest of the time, I was actually reconnected with who God created me to be. So it was an incredible experience.
So how do you prep for this? I just spoke with a lady last night, and she was talking about prep. She wants to run all 8 major city marathons.
Okay.
She has 2, Chicago and Boston, I think, and she wants to do Berlin next.
Yes.
And she says she's going to start now prepping for half a year.
Okay, yeah.
From what I read in your book, you flipped the switch, right? You went right into it.
Wasn't a lot of prep work. The prep work was, how can I afford to not look at a screen? Because if you think about it, most people, their income relies on screens. Right? You can't nobody can really just not look at a screen anymore. And so I kind of had to save up and do a couple more speaking events and all the things I needed to do so that I really didn't work for 2 months. And so that was the only amount of prep work. But one thing I did do that I think really satisfied a lot of people that kind of followed this story is I could have just written about the experience and how it made me feel. But I also flew to Los Angeles and got my brain scanned by a neuroscientist. And I had Dr. Amen. And so I had all my brain scans, my SPECT scans done. And he also had me do about 3 hours of cognitive memory testing before and after the experiment. So although this wasn't a scientific experiment because I was the only lab rat, right? It was experiential, but I got the results of what happened to my brain and what happened to my cognitive memory score, which will blow people's minds. And so that was kind of the only prep work. Besides that, I went and got my brain scanned. And then I went to my best friend Brian's house. And then I handed him my phone, and then he dropped me off at a monastery and just left. And it left me with nothing. And there I was stranded for 2 weeks with these monks with no way of finding out what's happening on planet Earth.
But you obviously thought a little bit about it because you don't do a brain test if you don't think about, okay, what could this do for you? So you anticipated some changes and you anticipate some physiological changes,
Oh,
right?
yeah. There was a lot of anticipation. But you know what's funny is there was, I didn't have I actually had less anxiety during this entire 2 months than I've had in my entire life. Like I literally was like, I've never felt such peace. And I'm somebody that has struggled with anxiety, panic disorders when I was, in my 20s and 30s. And so to feel that much peace and to realize how screens literally may be the main reason so many people are having a lot of mental health issues. But the one source of anxiety I did have was towards the end, when I was actually on my way to get my brain rescanned after it was over, I thought to myself, what if nothing's changed? Oh, and then I also thought to myself, what if it's worse? Right? Because I did this whole experiment hoping to write a book about it, what if I show back up to Dr. Amen's clinic? He's like, bro, get back on the screen because your brain is a disaster, Fortunately, that wasn't the case, but...
Oh, wow. Yeah, so you went to 2 places.
Yeah.
Maybe you tell a little bit about what those places were and why did you choose those?
Yeah, so again, not looking at screens, I initially was going to... I was just going to spend 2 weeks with no screens up in the mountains in a cabin. And I quickly realized I would probably go crazy if I did that. So the whole point of this wasn't to go crazy. It was to see kind of what my soul and my psyche were doing with screens. So then I said, okay, what are 2 kind of subcultures that I can step into that don't rely as heavily on screens? And so I thought, well, the Amish for sure. And we have a bunch of friends that are right on the outside of Amish circles. So like they've married a former Amish or they work with the Amish. And so I immediately went to Ohio to ask all of those friends, hey, do you know of any people that would let me live with them? Would do Amish people do that? I don't even know. Like, how do you find an Amish person to live with, right? And so that was the Amish. And then with the monks, my wife's father, so my father-in-law, I've never met him because he passed away when she was 16. He was a high-capacity volunteer at this abbey. So he was friends with all the monks. So my wife, when she was a little girl, would always go to this monastery, and she'd hang out there and run around the grounds. And all the really old monks now that are there, that are in their 70s and 80s, all remember my wife when she was 5 years old running around. So that was a little bit easier of an in because my wife called and said, this is Heather Whittaker, but Barkume was, oh my gosh, this is Bill's daughter. I remember you running around. So then she asks them and they're like, absolutely, we'd love to host your husband. He can come. So that was easy. The Amish, I knocked on, 10 different farms that of people that were recommended to me. The Millers may let you live with them. After 2 minutes of conversation, they were like, nope, sorry, you can't live here. And so like I couldn't find any Amish. Uh-huh. So I thought maybe this is just going to be a monk thing. Maybe I'm just going to write about the monks. The last farm that I went to, the Miller family, they were like, absolutely. But if you live with us, you have to do everything like us. You have to work like us. You have to everything. And I was like,
dress.
Okay. I mean, not dress. I didn't have to dress, but I definitely worked harder than I've ever worked in my entire life.
That's
it was hard.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, so no spoiler, but if you read through the book, you said easy. It wasn't easy, right? Not just the work, but you almost gave up, right?
Oh yeah, no, I actually almost gave up. Out of the 7.5 weeks, 2 days in, I was just 2 days in, and Matthias, I literally was going insane. Like we don't realize until we get rid of our screens how truly addicted we are to actually not the screens. I tell people now, you're not addicted to your phone because people are always like, oh, I'm addicted to my phone or this is addicted to my phone or whatever. And I'm like, that's actually not true. The phone is just the needle. Okay. And so a heroin addict isn't addicted to the needle. They're addicted to what's coming through it. So what I realized those first 2 days is I was having night sweats, heart palpitations. My body was physically coming off of whatever drug this was that was coming through my phone, that my drug was knowledge. And my drug was knowledge that led to feeling like I was in control. And suddenly when I had no screen, I had no control. And control was the thing that I was addicted to. Now, it took a while for me to figure that out, but now I can confidently say, wow, that's what I was addicted to. So for 2 or 3 days, I'm having heart palpitations, night sweats, like I'm shaking. I'm like, what is wrong with me?
So it's physically
physical
addiction.
Manifestations coming off. And so day 3, I called my wife from the monk phone in their office. And I said, because we had scheduled times during the week that I could call her and just kind of catch up. And I called her that first, it was 3 days in, and I said, I'm coming home. I can't, I'll write a book about 3 days without my phone. Like I can't do this. This is going to be horrible. And she's like, okay, I just want you to pray about it. Don't just ask Holy Spirit. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to ask.
I know what he's going to say.
I know what he's going to say. And I'm so grateful that she told me that because I asked Holy Spirit. He's like, no, not yet. He said, not yet. I remember feeling not yet. And I was like, okay, well, maybe in a week, But then day 4, Matthias, it felt like legitimately, I woke up that morning. It felt like an elephant had stepped off of my chest.
Wow.
Like I was like, and I could breathe deep. and I was in. At that point, by the time I needed to leave the monastery, you had to pry me out of there. Like, I love being married. I love my family, but I get it. I understand why people want to be monks.
See, that's a question I had for later on, kind of the reintegration. But before we get there, those two communities, they center their life around the Bible or biblical principles.
Very
right?
much so.
And how was that experience? Did you go through prayer morning, even at night? Did you follow their?
So I followed.
How did that look like?
I followed the hours. So they had hours, right? So in liturgy, it was 6 a.m. morning lauds, 7:30 a.m. Noon mass, 4 p.m. 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. again. So it was 6 times a day that I was in this tiny little chapel in the desert with these 20 Benedictine monks that would slowly walk in, chanting in Latin, singing in Latin. I'm trying to sing with them, and they gave me a little piece of paper, and I'm like, I'm trying my hardest to keep up. And I was so bored the first 2 days. I'm like, this is so boring. Like, I don't even know what I'm saying. But then by day 4 or 5, I'm like, these are psalms that they're singing. The psalms that we're singing, I may not know the language, but we're reading these bedtime psalms before we go to bed to prepare our hearts to hear from the Lord in our dreams. It was so beautiful to see how biblically centered every single thing that they did was, right? And they have the Benedictine order, so they have all of these things that they do very specifically as Benedictine monks. But I really not only was fascinated, but became infatuated with realizing why there's such order to their lives. And most of us, especially in 2025, have such chaos in our lives. And there's no chaos at the monastery. It is orderly. Everything, they walk at 3 miles an hour. That's how fast a human being walks. And one of the things that Father Francis told me while I was there is, Carlos, because I was like, why is everything so slow here? Can't we speed up? I want to, he's like, Jesus and his disciples did their ministry on their feet at 3 miles an hour. That's how fast a human being walks. Every bit of ministry Jesus did was at 3 miles an hour. Now, what in your life are you doing, Carlos, at 3 miles an hour? And this is what he said that shook me. Ready? He said, if Jesus is moving at 3 miles an hour and you're moving at 100 miles an hour, who's following who? Whoa, that really shifted my perspective. And so some of the things that I brought back to my life is every day I think, what in my life can I slow back down to 3 miles an hour, which I call Godspeed? What is that Godspeed that I can slow down to? What are hours in my day? I have an alarm that goes off on my phone 6 times a day, the same 6 times that they're doing their prayers, because I want to continue to pray with my monk friends. I want to do that. So that's still happening in my life. I don't take 30 minutes, but I stop and I've got my little Catholic book that I open up and I'm reading. Okay, what's today? That's the same ones that my brother's over at St. Andrew's Abbey. So I'm still connected in those ways.
Yeah. So did you take notes? Or did you just immerse yourself and just say, I'm going to need some time really to absorb and observe? Or did you, throughout the time, really just say, I need to take notes to write the book? What did you do?
Oh, yeah. No. I journaled. I journaled like mad. I mean, like I've never written. That first night, I realized I don't write with the pen anymore. My hand was cramping up after a paragraph, and I was like, this is something else that's wrong with these screens. And so, lots of journaling every single day, because what was happening was that not only was I fascinated with the monk's life, but what I realized really quickly was that these screens have actually, they have really, they've stolen all of these human things that the Lord intended for us to do and to use. They've been stolen by screens. So it was day 2. The monks are walking in, and I remember thinking, well, it was the second full day, and I was like, why do they, I wonder why they walk in 6, why do they do this 2 by 2, 6 times a day? And I remember reaching into my pocket to grab my phone so I could Google, why do monks do, and all of a sudden, guess what happened?
You had to ask him.
Yes. And here's the other problem. This was during grand silence, and so I couldn't ask them. And so I was stuck. I said, I wonder why. And then I was stuck actually having to wonder. And I realized really quickly, oh my goodness, wondering is actually extinct. Nobody wonders anymore because people say, I wonder, and they think that's wondering. Just asking the question, I wonder, saying the statement, I wonder, isn't wondering. What we do is we pull out ChatGPT, pull out Grok, pull out whatever it is, Google, and there's no wondering. The wondering is over. Google's the wonder killer. It's over. I had to wonder for 2 months. I didn't know the answers. I had to say, I don't know. I had to sit in questions. Oh my gosh. I honestly believe that if Bible followers would wonder more instead of knowing more, and this is going to be hard for a lot of academics to hear, maybe we're not supposed to know everything. Maybe God created us to wonder a lot more, and maybe that wondering is going to lead us to some really beautiful places. It did me. So the subtitle of my book is How 7 Screen-Free Weeks with Monks and Amish Farmers Helped Me Recover the Lost Arts of Being Human. Wondering, noticing, that's extinct, savoring, solitude, intuition, getting lost and finding our way. All of these things have become extinct because of our phones, and I got to experience them again. And that's all I'm trying to help people do, is to find out what's beautiful on the other side.
Yeah, brilliant. You mentioned pace, speed, and both of us are old enough to remember a time before smartphones, right? Where we had to go to a rotary phone, or it was kind of one of those cubes where you had to call somebody, and there was no instant gratification, there was no instant response.
Right.
So people had to wait for you to come back, and if you couldn't get a hold of somebody, you just didn't know where they were until they called, right? And that's it's you know, we know, but we forget. We live in a completely different reality today. Yeah. The other part that you mentioned I find super interesting is the idea of order. You know, that God is a God of order, and they follow an order in their life. And not a very biblical comparison, but, you know, I grew up in Germany and been in East Germany a few times. And when the wall fell down, a lot of those folks there, because their life was planned for them, right? So they had a scan at the beginning. They'd been told what school to go for, what to study. They had a scan of their body. They knew what sport they would do. Everything was planned. So when that ended, you know, and they had the freedom to do what they wanted to do and go wherever they wanted to, a lot of the people were lost because they had to take care of that themselves, right? There was no order. There was no plan. It was anarchy for them. And there were some T-shirts at some point that floated around said, I want my wall back.
Wow.
Right? Because it was basically the desire to get back to this order. And I think that the human longing for something that's order, that's biblical in this case, I think that's something that you discovered there, right?
I think so. You know, I think there's a longing for order that I didn't even know that I had, because I'm a pretty free spirit. Like I will, my wife and I will get on an airplane, fly to another country on the other side of the planet with no idea where we're going to stay that night. Like we just want to land there and be like, all right, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? We pull up Airbnb. Oh, that one's closed. Well, we can do this one. And we just kind of fly by this. There's not a lot of order in my life. There's not a lot of, and so I didn't think I would appreciate or enjoy so much order in my life. Oh, was I think it's because I didn't even know how much breath order would give me, right? Like I didn't even know. Let me give it this example. When I moved to Nashville, I was 38 years old. And Nashville, Tennessee, there's a lot of allergies in Nashville. Like there's pollen and trees, and a lot of people are allergic to that. Well, I'd never had allergies my whole life. But my wife told me about 3 weeks into moving there, hey, every night when you're going to sleep, you're wheezing. Like you're like, I can hear you breathing. So you should go see a doctor, like an allergy doctor. I think you may have asthma or something. And I was like, what? I'm fine. I was like, I'm working out. I'm running every day. I don't feel like I'm not breathing. So I go to the allergist. He has me blow in a tube, and I blow as hard as I can. And he goes, wow, son, you're only using 65% of your lung capacity. Ooh. I go, that's crazy. He goes, here. And he handed me an inhaler. And I'd never used an inhaler. But I looked at it and I kind of shook it up, and he's like, so what I want you to do is I want you to push the button, take a deep breath, let it out, and the next breath, you're going to go from 65% to 100% of your lungs. I was like, no way. So I go, and then the next breath, Matthias, I almost started to cry because my lungs filled with air like they hadn't since I moved to Nashville, and I didn't even know I wasn't breathing. Huh. That's exactly what it felt like for me with these monks. Once I got it, and the God of order began to say, you know what, you can add some more order to your life, Carlos, and it's going to fill your lungs to 100% instead of 65%. There's so much more order in my life now because I feel like I've got this inhaler called order again, right? And so anyway, pretty cool.
Yeah. So you spoke about the monastery. The other part was the Amish, fascinating community.
Yes.
And, you can obviously talk about anything that you picked there, but the thing that stood out to me was the art of the shared meal.
Yes.
You said you spent 4 hours. There was no end to the meal. You wouldn't get up.
Ends. They just ate and talked and talked and talked. And I'm like, I guess it was probably day 4 before I was comfortable enough to ask Willis, my farmer friend, hey, how come you guys eat so long? Like, it just takes so long to eat. And he goes, Carlos, we don't have Facebook. We don't have Instagram. There's no way for me to know what's happening in my family's life or my friends' lives unless we actually look each other face to face and talk.
The show you binge is actually the life of you with each other, right?
Yes, no, totally. And so when we eat, it's a meal. When you eat, you're just eating. See, it's different. A meal and eating are different. So I started to realize how important these meals were to them, and then I did a little research for my book. It shows that the average American meal in 1923 lasted 90 minutes long. The average American meal in 2023 lasts 12 minutes long. We have lost the art of meals and the art of community around a table and the beauty of the table. And so that's something that even the monks did very well, longer meals. But yeah, I really loved that. Even breakfast, we'd have a big breakfast before we would go out and work in the fields. And we would just sit, drink our coffee and talk and talk and talk. And it was really beautiful. This is something else that was beautiful. Because of all these conversations that I was having with Willis, I talked a lot more to Willis than I did the monks, right? Willis is Amish because he believes in certain things that I don't believe in because I'm not Amish, or else I would be Amish. Yeah. So there was a lot of differing opinions on the world, on political issues, on a lot of things that Willis and I did not see eye to eye. In the real world, quote unquote, my world, I bet Willis and I probably wouldn't necessarily want to hang out together because we would just think we knew what we knew about each other. But because I was able to sit with him for hours and hours and have these deep conversations about divisive topics, you can't hate somebody face to face, breath to breath, sharing a meal. It's so difficult to do that. And I realized really quickly, wow, maybe the table could be one of the things that can start helping our society come back together again. People don't share meals together anymore. People don't talk about hard things face to face. It's all with their thumbs on a 6-inch piece of LCD. That's no way to do it. So I love that even that piece, I became friends with a guy that we view the world completely through different lenses. Now, biblically, we're pretty close, but as far as like opinions on issues and things, we're pretty far apart. But it didn't matter. We call ourselves Willos when we're together, Carlos and Willis, because we're such good friends, you know?
That's
and
cool.
So I really grew to love that family.
And I think a part of it is also that you have the personal conversation rather than the digital conversation,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And oftentimes today I hear this, I need to remove myself from that conversation because you have a different opinion, right?
Right.
And right there, you actually choose
Yes.
to be with somebody else,
Yes.
despite your different opinions, and
Yes.
you just sit it or argue it out in love, right?
Talk it out. And then also, you know, I said this to Willis because a friend of mine said this to me. He said, Carlos, when people ask me where I stand on an issue, I don't say, I say, actually, I don't. I don't stand on issues. I walk with people. And I was like, well, that's a really good way to put it. And so during this experiment, that's what I did. I have opinions on issues. I think it's very important, but I'm not going to stand on that opinion. I'm actually going to walk with people that have different opinions on those issues. And so that's what I did with the Amish. And it's so much better that way. You know, I just think that these screens have become these ecosystems of rage that we're swimming in. And I don't believe that our souls and our psyche were created with the capacity to consume that much rage and content. They just weren't. I don't even have to say I don't think. Like, well, we all know we weren't created for this. And so what are we going to do? What are we going to do about it?
Part of it, and I think we spoke about it before, is that we have to process so much information, right? Yeah. And so many things that go us, have to check the news in the morning, have to keep up to date on what's going on with the job, manage all the emails, and you have a messaging system, then you have social media, and it's almost impossible to stay up to date. Somebody brings up a topic and you're not on the latest. You haven't caught up that TikTok trend or the article that whoever wrote, and you being removed from this, it must have been a huge weight that fell off your shoulders. Your brain. We're going to get back to that.
Yeah,
right?
You know, I would say that it was that third day, right, when I felt like the elephant stepped off my chest. Because for those first few days, I was almost manic in like wanting to know where are my kids on Life 360? How fast are they going? What's happening with the news? I guess it's 2022. Did Trump announce this? Is he going to be running? All these things that I didn't have access to information. I didn't know. I would have to ask a monk. Hey, can you tell me what happened? With my soccer team yesterday, Nashville SC. I didn't know, but the weight that fell off my shoulders to suddenly realize that, Carlos, you actually weren't created to know everything that you know. You weren't. And I think one of the things I learned is that maybe, just go with me for a second, we were only created to know what's happening. If you look at the history of humanity up until the advent of the smartphone, people really only knew what was happening in their community. Really, people only knew what was happening with the butcher, the school teacher, maybe at the post office. And then maybe they'd read a newspaper article, and that newspaper article would tell them something that's happening on the other side of the world. But now we know every single tragedy that is happening every single second of every single day. And I finally got to unplug from that. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay for us to do this. So one thing that I did, Matthias, am I saying your name correctly when I say that every time?
You probably say it better than I do.
Okay.
Matthias. Yeah.
Matthias. I add the ta because I've got the Latino in me.
Yeah, that's good. I love it.
Is one of the things I did is I realized I know too much. I don't want to go back to knowing everything again. So I'm still influencing on social media. I'm still Instagramming but one of the things that I was taking most of my screen time was news apps or X. I love to know what's happening. But I said, I feel so light now. I can't go back to it. So I deleted all the news apps off my phone. Whenever I get interviewed by like a news anchor or something, they always don't like this part of my explanation of what I did. But they're like, don't delete all the news apps. You're the only account that Yeah. But I deleted them all off my phone, all of them. So I had no way of getting the news. And I subscribed to the Tennessean, which is our local newspaper in Nashville. And every single morning, just like my dad in the 80s, I'd walk in my front yard. Even today, I walk in my front yard, and there's, wrapped in plastic, is my newspaper. And I read it every morning, and it's great. I find out everything that happened in Nashville, in my hometown. I go to the world section, what's happening in the world, go to the nation section, see what's happening in America. I read it all. It takes me about 30 minutes. And then if anything else happens on planet Earth, I'll find out tomorrow.
Gee.
That's
so cool.
It's such a breath.
It's almost romantic,
yeah,
right? It's just, you kind of
really
you kind of time travel. It reminds you of some of those movies where the actors just kind of come into the world and they're reluctant to get into this world, and in the end they don't want to leave.
They don't want to, and I did not want to leave. I did not want to leave.
So how did the reintegration work? Yeah. Did you prep for that? Were you scared to go back?
Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah, I definitely didn't know what it was going to be like, and the closer I got to it, the more terrified I was of plugging back in. I mean, I had not looked at a screen again for 2 months. And so when I flew back to LA with my paper boarding pass, again, it's just, I didn't have a phone. So if you've ever traveled without a phone in the last 15 years, you don't even know how to do it. You can't order an Uber. Like I landed and had to I told Leanne what time I was going to land. This was when I went to the Amish from the monks. And I got off the plane with my paper boarding pass and I had my bag. And I just had to walk out to baggage claim and hope she was there, because I talked to her the day before and she wasn't.
So you had to borrow somebody's phone because there's no phones anymore? Or you just waited?
I didn't know her phone number because I don't have phone number memorized, right? And so I didn't even have a way to do that. And I thought, well, maybe I can ask them if I can DM, if they have Instagram, if I can DM her. Yeah, my brain started, and then I was like, you know what I'm just going to do? Wait. And sure enough, 20 minutes later, she showed up. I'm so sorry. There's traffic. She shows up or whatever. But like, that's something else we don't know what to do with anymore. Just waiting, right? So I just like waited. So the reintegration piece, I was so scared to get my phone back because, it felt, when Brian handed me my phone, it felt like it weighed 20 pounds. Like a gun. Oh my gosh. I just was like, and so I took it, I got my brain rescanned. And even after all that, I left Dr. Amen's clinic and I waited 3 more days to turn it on. I didn't want to turn it on because I just knew all the notifications and that. When I turned that thing back on, bro, I thought it was going to like explode. It would like start smoking. It was like, I thought it was going to take off and like blow up. It was ding, 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 ding. 2 months of notifications that were waiting for me. Let me tell you what I did. And then I want to tell you about my brain scan results. But I did something that would probably, a lot of people that hear when I say this, it freaks them out. But I went to my messages because I can't remember how many thousands of messages were. And I just selected all. And I hit delete.
Gee, what a freeing or scary experience.
Yeah. Well, I just hit delete, and I was like, you know what? If any of these people the last 2 months that have reached out to me want to get a hold of me, they'll do it again. So I deleted all of them, every single one of them, and it was so freeing. I was just like, there it is. I don't even know who texted me. Like I deleted it. It was awesome.
I'm a bit jealous.
I bet. Yeah.
Oh man. But one thing I forgot to ask about the experience there, because they're two faith-based experience, and the Bible plays a big role in their life. How did your interaction with the Bible change there? Did you pick up certain habits? Did you feel like you got deeper into it because you had time? You didn't have anything else? How was
Can
that?
I tell you, when you lower the volume of life, the volume of God explodes. And even so, I read more scripture than I ever have in my entire life in those 7.5 weeks. So I'm in the Word every morning. I'm in the Word every afternoon and the evening. And even when I'm reading it, like it's just more alive because I'm not reading it on my phone. Bobby, you're a good friend of mine. No offense to you, version, but like I'm not having like other notifications popping up while I'm reading the Word. That's going to take me to something else or to something. I just had my paper Bible and I just was reading it, and it was just more alive. It was more. It almost like there was like a soundtrack to reading the Word of God that I don't think I'd heard before. Like it was, things made more sense. I think my brain, when I tell you about my scans, I think my brain was actually processing the information, the scriptures, in a way different way than they ever had before because I was so distracted as I read the Word. I was, all the things. I didn't have all my commentaries and all the other things that I had access to all the time. Well, let me go over here and no, I just had the Word.
Well, did you speak with those guys, with the monks and the Amish, about certain parts? Anything that sticks out in terms of what you took away from kind of a biblical knowledge?
Yeah, I think, biblically speaking, the thing that I left the monastery with that Father Francis told me, because here's the thing. When you get alone with just your thoughts and you have no way to numb them and to make them stop, we have ways to make our brains, if we start getting weird thoughts, we can just pick up TikTok and scroll for a second and boom, now cat videos and we're okay. But I had no way of doing that. So I actually started having a little bit of a crisis of faith when I was at the monastery. I was like, wait, Jesus? Well, okay, wait a second. He was God, but he was man. This is what I believed my whole life. And then he died and got up and rose. And I'm basing my entire. And then so I'd also picked up at the monk used bookstore. They have a used bookstore on the property. This may not be. This is actually isn't what you asked me. I'm just going to tell you anyway. This book on the Big Bang. Okay, and it was a scientist that wrote a Big Bang. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm having like a crisis of faith with the Bible, and there's a book about the Big Bang. I'm going to leave an atheist. Like, what's going to happen? And I just remember Matthias opening this Big Bang book, and it was like 240 billion years ago, there was 4 atoms that were the size of a teaspoon that interacted with another thing, and it only took me 1 page to think to myself, that actually sounds more preposterous than the resurrection. Yeah. Like that actually sounds more. And I started looking at the stars and all of a sudden God became bigger And it was like he was more real. And the thing that Father Francis told me, he was like my anchor there. He was the former abbot. He said, Carlos, what you're learning to do is to behold. He goes, we don't behold anymore. Behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy. But whenever someone says behold, there's a grand announcement that's about to be given. You're beholding everything now, and it's so new for you. And so I really leaned into beholding in Scripture, what solitude really means, why the Lord wants us to have times of solitude, times of silence with the monks. Whereas with the Amish, I think where they're really biblically based, and what they really pull from is within community and how they do community. The scriptures that, they would read in the middle of dinner. I got to go to Amish church. Not very many people get to go to Amish church. They never let outsiders come into Amish church. They speak in Pennsylvania Dutch. It's actually half German, half Dutch. It's like this weird thing that they put together. And they all speak this language there. Like they're not speaking in English. They're, right here in the middle of the United States, and they're speaking a different language.
In church, not outside.
And outside.
And outside.
Yeah. But they know English, but if they don't want me to understand what they're saying, they switch to that.
Okay.
But church is 100% a different language. It's 3 hours long. They are reading the Word of God almost half the time, in a different language. The men are sit on one side, the women sit on the other. They face each other. The preachers are in the middle. It was the craziest experience ever. But like as I'm with them, I realize how important like community actually is. And even biblically, he would just share with me constantly, like, this is what the book of Acts says about community. And so we're trying to really live that out here. And it's getting harder, Carlos, because I noticed they had flip phones. And I'm like, the Amish have flip phones?
Oh, they did?
Yes, I was so disappointed.
I
was like, what's happening? They're like...
Were you tempted?
No, I wasn't tempted. I did get some information from them. But okay. But they were like, we can no longer do business and support our farms. We started to close down because we weren't allowing this technology in. Yeah. So in order for us to survive as a community, we had to make the decision to allow some sort of technology to come in that we can compete with other businesses that were taking all of our business. So like they're even having these conversations, but they're very, I actually didn't know what they believed, the Amish, biblically speaking. And there's actually, if you go to Holmes County, Ohio, there's a Mennonite Amish, because the Mennonites are basically less conservative Amish. Yeah. Like it's, and so I know a lot more people know Mennonites than they do Amish. I would say just go and like see how biblically solid the Mennonites are. And the Amish are even more so, the Bible is their foundation for sure.
So we took the loop back into the time inside.
Yes.
And now we were already outside and talked about reintegration.
Oh, yes.
How did you approach this? Did you have a plan? Of course you deleted all those. Was that impulsive? Or did you say, okay, when I'm going to go back, I'm going to do these things just to make sure that I don't fall back into where it was before and this whole time is lost?
Yeah. I definitely... As I was planning maybe the last week when I was with my family. Oh, because I also, after the Amish, so I went monks 2 weeks, Amish 2 weeks, family 3 weeks. So I lived at home in Nashville with my family for 3 weeks, no screens. So during that time, I was actually able to, since I was back in Nashville around my friends and things, I was like, okay, so maybe I can do this by doing this. There's no way I can do this. So I started to plan, right? I started to make
So
a
that
plan.
time is when you started to practice.
Yes.
How do I actually figure this out when my
yes.
kids watch TV and I sit there and...
Totally.
Okay.
So I'm going to walk out of the room. And also I knew I was going to get my phone back. So I also was like, how do I just not be on it as much? How do I, I started to kind of really place all these boundaries up. And by the time it was time to get my phone back, I felt like it was too much. Like I was like, all these rules, like I don't want to live like with all these phone screen rules. This sounds horrible. But what I realized when I got my phone back is that I saw that all of the things that I had fallen in love with, the noticing, the savoring, the wondering, the getting lost, the beholding, all these things, I actually had more of a desire to do that than scroll on my phone. And I thought, And then so for a few weeks, my screen time was like 40 minutes a day. And I was back on Instagram. I was back doing email. I was back texting people. But I was like, how am I still succeeding in my business only on my phone 40 minutes a day? Quite possibly that maybe all of the work I was actually doing and the rest of the time was I just wasting my life away as I was scrolling. So what I tell people is when you fall back in love with all of these things on the other side of the screen, you just pick your phone up a lot less. Yes, there were things that I did. There are a few things that I still do. One thing that gave me an hour, that will give every single listener of your podcast a whole hour back a day of their screen time, is if they just buy an alarm clock. Studies show that the average American spends 30 minutes scrolling before they fall asleep and 30 minutes after they wake up first thing in the morning, because they use their phone as their alarm clock. When I started charging my phone in the kitchen and just bought an alarm clock that goes next to my bed, all that thing does is wake me up.
So it's just the proximity of the device. You're not tempted to pick it up and do something else. You just wanted to check the time, but now you do 1,000 other things.
Because what happens is when you wake up in the morning, there's 47 notifications, and you're just like, I don't even have my glasses on yet. I'm just kind of trying to see and I click on that one. Oh my gosh, I forgot that meeting today. And before I even get out of bed, I'm stressed. Before I even get out of bed, my brain is where it's not supposed to be. So I spend really the first hour of my day and the last 30 minutes of my day with no screens. And so that saves the average American a whole hour just buying an alarm clock, subscribing to a newspaper. Like all of these things I started to do that slowly started getting me back. And so now I'm at 3.5 hours a day on my phone, where I was 7.5 hours a day. So I've gained 4 hours back of living a day because I've put these changes in my life. I'm still doing everything I was doing, which equals 2.5 months a year. So 2.5 months a year, I've now gained back by just shifting a few things in my life.
Yeah. My wife is the anti-tech person in my family, so there's no phones in the bedroom. And also, she hates microwaves.
Yeah,
and I always thought it was a health thing, right? Because it ruins the food. But part of it is, you have to spend the time cooking.
Yeah.
So the 30 seconds turn into 5 minutes, and you stand there, you do stuff together. So
what other things did sounds like your wife and my wife would be good friends.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, they come up with crazy ideas, then that we have to follow. No, this is. What other things did you pick up? So you mentioned that the newspaper. You mentioned the notifications that you turned off. What other things did you pick up that you think kind of stand out without going through the whole book that people should apply?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I challenge people to do, at least once or twice a week, is to, when you're going somewhere, don't use maps. Don't use GPS. If you know how to get to Chick-fil-A, why in the world are you putting in Chick-fil-A? Well, Carlos, it's because it's 5 miles away, and what if there's traffic? It'll get me there faster. What if there is traffic? Just sit in it. Just be 5 minutes late to Chick-fil-A. I spend 5 more minutes. So people don't know what to do with this. I spoke to a bunch of high schoolers last week, seniors in high school, and I challenged them to this. And I was like, I want you to find somewhere to go this week. And I want you to look it up before you go, write the directions down on a piece of paper, and don't use your phone to get there. They thought it was the coolest thing ever. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. And so I was getting texts from the teachers going these kids for an entire week have been talking about where they're going to drive this week without looking at their phone. These are the little things that I had to do. When Willis told me, so they have e-bikes now, right? So the Amish have gone from horse and buggies to e-bikes, more technology. Right? Because they realize,
you
real? Yeah. There's a lot less horse and buggies around. Now almost all of them are on e-bikes, right? Zipping around town, right? Just like the ones you see in DC. It's people Amish. Imagine just dresses flowing in the wind as they're on their e-bikes.
And that's okay.
That's okay. Because this is another thing.
Because it's a natural resource.
No, this is another. So I think this is going to be really helpful for people.
We're getting lost there, but it's cool.
The Amish, I thought were just anti-technology. I thought that they thought it was evil. Cameras are evil, all these things, whatever. And he goes, Carlos, no. We allow technology. He's like, if you look at the Amish 100 years ago, we're doing things differently than they are. In 100 years, the Amish are going to be doing things differently than us. What we do is we ask 2 questions with every piece of technology that we decide to incorporate into our culture. Is this piece of technology going to bring us closer to who we want to be as a community and closer together, or is it going to take us farther apart? So, case in point, we don't have cars and we'll never have cars. Why? Cars travel too fast and will take us too far away from each other that if someone has a crisis, we can't be back together in community to rebuild their barn or to help them. But with e-bikes, we can do that because they actually only take us about as far as a horse can go before the horse has to turn around and come back and you have to recharge the battery and come home. So e-bikes won't take us farther away from each other than we need to be. So that's the question that they ask with every piece of technology. That's why they'll never have TVs, because that's going to take them away from what they want to be as a community.
That's cool. It's kind of like what Jesus said when he spoke about the Sabbath, right?
Yes.
He said it's not that the people are there for the Sabbath. The Sabbath is there for the people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I can't remember what the first question you asked me was, but
what did you take away other than the things that you mentioned?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. So what I was going to tell you is that Willis asked me to go to the feed store to get a part for his tractor. And I was like, okay. And so this was like day 4 I was with the Amish. And so he gave me his e-bike, and there's an actual trailer on the back of his e-bike. Mm-hmm. And he goes, okay, so this is how you're going to get there. You're going to go down Highway 64, then you're going to turn right at the stop sign, and then you're going to go past the Smith barn. You're going to go left. And I just remember all of a sudden I started hearing wah, 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 wah. And I'm like, is he expecting me to remember the directions to this place? And at the end, I was like, oh, so, okay. And I just took off. And I got lost 2 minutes later. I was lost. It was supposed to be 15 minutes. And 4 hours later, I got home. And he's just laughing. And I realized, gosh, God created us to find our way. And we no longer find our way because we have so many other things on these screens telling us our way. Mm. What happens if we can start finding our way? So that's something I no longer do. I no longer use maps. Wow. I no longer use, I look up before I leave on my phone, and I write down on a napkin how to get somewhere. And guess what happens? I get lost. And then I have to pull into a gas station and ask another human being. And they're like, oh, yeah. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, man, that was fun. I found out, I got a new friend.
You make me discover my wife's wisdom, right? I have to bring her up again. Whenever we get lost, she says, no, we didn't get lost. It's an adventure.
Yes, there it is.
So, yeah. Well, one thing that you that kind of spoke through here, and you picked out, and it's coming in some of your other books out, is the focus on how to be a human.
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Yeah,
I think it shined through what you described.
Totally.
But yeah.
Well, because really this experiment and this book Reconnected is almost like the experiment of how to human. So it's like I wrote a book called How to Human in 2023. Mm-hmm. It came out when everything was so polarized, and things still are, but so divisive. I was like, oh my gosh, we've forgotten how to do this. I wrote a book called How to Human. And then this book, Reconnected, is almost like the How to Human experiment. It's like I went and lived with Amish people that are nothing like me. How to Human is all about how to exist with people that are nothing like you. This is the talk that I do in a lot of corporate settings. I go into corporate spaces where they're like, polarization is at its all-time high. Can you come in and help us? And I'm like, yes. So then I talk about seeing people that are nothing like you, and what does that look like? And every human is desperate to be seen. But before you can enter into and see somebody, you really have to be human. That's the first step. Be human, which is all about lowering the volume of life, slowing down 3 miles an hour. Once you lower the volume of life, then you begin to have the capacity inside of you to see people that are nothing like you. The problem right now is that people are trying to have conversations with people that are nothing like them, but they have no capacity to even have those conversations because they're already so full of knowledge, so full of all these things, that when you lower the volume of life, you just kind of empty out and make room in yourself to be able to have conversations with people that aren't anything like you. That's the see human piece, and then the free human piece. So it's be human, see humans, free humans. I like to tell people all the time, especially because I'm in the corporate space a lot, that everyone is looking for freedom in some way, shape, or form. Every single person. Every person in this room right now, all of you lawyers and attorneys, you all want freedom from something. And guess what? The people that you're serving all want freedom from something. How can we help free people? Because hurt people, but free people. And so just kind of helping people navigate this polarizing world, the way that you do it is through what I honestly believe is through curiosity. And that's the human piece that I think could probably bridge a lot of the division that we're feeling right now. And the framework I built with that, which may be a book one day, I don't know, but it's curiosity leads to empathy, right? Then now you're feeling with. Empathy leads to trust with whoever you're empathizing with. Trust from that person will then lead to relationship. Oh, now we're in. And that the relationship can lead to change. Mm-hmm. So curiosity ultimately leads to change. But I know when you're curious, you're going to want to see the other person change. But what happened to me on this experiment was I was curious and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to see them change. But it was actually me that changed.
So it's obvious that there's a physiological, we have to talk about that in a moment, physiological change, there's a spiritual change, and there's a sociological change.
Yes.
And it's so tempting to say, well, this is a devil's device, this is bad, technology is bad, we shouldn't use it, we should turn back time, we should go the Amish way and do that. But that's not where you landed.
No.
I don't know if compromise is the right word or just a healthy. How would you describe what your approach is right now?
Yeah, I think my approach is, I see all the good that comes from screens. I mean, I've my Instagram followers, 320,000 people every day I get to talk to. We've raised $1.7 million for strangers in the last year. Just, these are soccer moms and soccer dads and just people that are like, give me $5 in Venmo for a need that I kind of pull out. And like, that could never happen without screens. That could never happen. And so what I've landed on is, I do think that the pendulum is going to swing back. I think that there is no. I love AI. I use it every single day. I think this is incredible. But I also think it's making us less human. And I'm all about how can we use the phones instead of the phones using us. And that's just the biggest difference. And that's kind of how I look at it. So every day when I use my screens, I'm like, am I using it or is it using me? Am I using it or is it using me? And that's kind of like the question that the Amish are asking. It's a little bit different, but that's my, I think my litmus test is, and then also the math. I challenge everybody to open up their screen time right now, look at the math of what you're averaging, and then just really quickly say, what's that a week, a month, a year, and then I'll plug in 30 years. I don't know. I'll give everybody that's listening to this 30 more years of life. And how long are you going to, you don't want to spend that time looking at a screen. You want to spend that time looking at your kids. You want to spend that time looking at your, and I think those things for me are the things that are kind of grounding me. And I don't think I'll ever have a problem again. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to go back up to my bad days are like 4 hours a day. And not, I say bad, it's not necessarily bad. I'm just using my phone to do things, but I've made changes. I use my laptop a lot more. So like, again, this is phone screen. That's not even counting laptops and TVs and all the other things. But something else that I would tell people that is really helpful is I spent 7 weeks and I never, on my body or wrist, I never had anything go bzz and take me away from where I was, right? Like, turn your notifications off. Like, unless you're a doctor that has life-saving heart surgery on somebody that's going to die, if you don't get your beeper going off, there is no reason for you to not be able to. You can still have notifications on your phone when you pick it up. When you pick it up, they're all still there on my phone. When I go pick up my phone, I'll probably have 20 different, this person messaged you or whatever, but it's never going to interrupt
you from being there in the moment.
From being in the moment. So I had 2 months where I never removed my gaze or my mind from the conversation. Because when something buzzes in your pocket and you're talking to somebody else, even if it's for a nanosecond, I wonder, is that my kid? Are they texting? And then you're back.
So smartwatches are a no-go for you.
No go. I wear a Whoop. This thing just kind of tells me my vitals and my health or whatever. No screen on it. So yeah, no notifications for me. I know that's not plausible for every single person. I understand that. But what can you remove to make yourself more present in the moment?
Yeah, I like the part of the control that you mentioned. Is using the phone using you. Your son is about to go to college.
Yeah.
My son just went to college, and we had a conversation. Now that he's in charge of his own life, and nobody's pinging him to do his own work or whatever else, and he has to do that. So we were talking about some of the technology that he's using, and the word that always came up is control.
Yeah.
Are you in control, or is somebody else or something else in control of what you're doing?
Yes.
So it seems like that's in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, one thing that you mentioned a few times, we don't want to end this without talking about it, is the physiological part.
Yes.
You went back to have your brain scan. What came out of it? What did Dr. Amen tell you?
Yeah, Dr. Amen told me that my cerebellum, he said he sees about 5 years of healing in those 7 weeks. So the cerebellum is the largest part of your brain that is used for a lot of your kind of main functions in your body. So that was like, okay, wow. But I still didn't like understand what that meant. I was like, okay, cool. You tell me that my cerebellum's better. And he showed me my brain scans. And he's like, this is better. This is better. He's like, it's definitely better. I was like, okay, but like, what does that mean? Right? Like, I'm just, again, I'm not a scientist or a doctor or medical guy. He goes, oh, well, let me tell you about your cognitive memory score. He said, now you're going to get it. Your cognitive memory score. And again, 3 hours of testing, flashing numbers on a screen. Then I'd have to like repeat the numbers on the keyboard, flashing faces. And then when they'd flash different faces, and when I recognized a face, I'd hit spacebar, that kind of stuff. I went from the 50th percentile of men in America to the 99th percentile of memory for men in America. At the end of this experiment, I literally only had 1% of men in America that had better memory than me. So my memory went from the 50th percentile to the 99th percentile. Crazy. Yeah. I was remembering like 37 numerals in a row on this test. He's like, this is mind blowing. This is crazy. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. So you we're talking about who you are. You say you're a teacher, you're not a therapist, but a lot of people come to you to get therapy or to get advice on what they do. If you have sit on something like this, if you had this experience, right, and you went to places that kind of broadened your horizon or actually brought you back to the basics, is that something that you encourage people to do, to find their places where they remove themselves from things, or you almost want to say, I want to make this something that everybody applies to their life, and here you are, and it's kind of like people don't change because it's so ingrained in how we are and who we live.
And they don't even think they can do it. People are like, they'll just give up before they even try. Yeah. Like Carlos, like my whole job relies on screens. Like, how in the world am I supposed to? So you can do one thing. Everybody can do one thing, and I promise you that like it's going to take work. Like, it is going to take work. It's not easy. It's kind of like when you go from, I'm looking at these really fancy cameras in front of me, right? I mean, these are really nice cameras. My wife has a camera like this. She actually has a Sony that we were camping once, and she's like, hey, can you take a picture of the stars? And I was like, I mean, sure. So I put it on auto mode, right? And I aimed it at the stars. And there was like 30,000 stars in the sky, and I took the picture, and there was only like 7 stars. And I was like, but it's a really expensive camera. She's like, yeah, why didn't it work? So I texted my photographer friend, and he goes, was it on auto mode? I said, yeah. He goes, oh, you can't capture the abundance of stars in auto mode. You're actually going to have to put it on manual mode. I go, oh, I don't know how to do that. He goes, I know you don't, and you're going to screw up. But I'm going to tell you how. First, you have to find the shutter speed. Then you have to find the aperture. Then you have to find the ISO. Oh, he was using all these words. It took me 40 minutes to find all the things. And I kept taking, then I took a photo.
And it was morning by the end.
I'm telling you, an hour and a half later, after doing everything he said, I took a photo, and it looked like it could be on National Geographic. There was 30,000 stars. Like, I was like, I took a gasp. And guess what? Like, that's what I'm talking about here. Like, we want to do everything on auto mode. And if you're on auto mode, you're going to end up with 7 stars, which is, okay, great. Round of applause. But God did not create us to live a life with 7 stars when there's actually 300,000 stars up there, but it's going to take work to get there. And the work is so important, and everybody can get there if you just try a little bit at a time. I promise you, it's going to be worth it. And I want everybody to see the sky like I see the sky now, instead of like I did in auto mode.
Wow. Last question. I might put you a little bit on the spot with this one, but to close this out, is there a passage in the Bible in all this time that stood out to you that you took with you?
That I took with me? Yeah. Probably in the middle of all of this, when you have, again, you don't have a screen to look at. Your mind goes 1,000 different places. And probably in the middle of this, I started feeling the grace and the goodness of God in parts of my life that I'd never experienced before. And I think it's because I allowed room for that to begin to happen. I was, and the scripture, let me tell you what it is. 1 Peter 5:10, it says, "May the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ Jesus, personally restore, establish, strengthen, and support you after you have suffered a little. And those 4 promises are literally what I felt happen during these 2 months. He personally restored me, established me, strengthened me, and supported me. And I love that the scripture goes, after you have suffered, because those first 3 days were rough, a little. You see, a lot of people are in a long season of suffering, and they think, Carlos, I'm waiting for the restoration, the establishment, all those promises. And you say, it says a little, I promise you, once it happens, that pain is going to, right now it feels like your whole book, but then it'll feel like a chapter, then it'll feel like a paragraph, then a sentence, then a word. And then maybe one day it'll feel like a period. But that scripture, 1 Peter 5:10, really became exactly what happened to me during this entire experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Carlos.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Let this be a prayer on you, that you kind of read through again and apply what we heard here. I highly recommend this book, Reconnect by Carlos Whittaker. Check it out. We'll put it in the show notes so you can check it out and buy it. If you want to follow Carlos, what's your handle?
Loswhit, LOSWHIT.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked this conversation, if you learned something new, then share it with your family and friends, or leave us a review so more people can find out about the history, narrative, and impact of the Bible. Be sure to follow us here or on your social media platform of choice. See or hear you next time on Unscrolled.